Okay, welcome to the social media for your small business presentation. And if I can just share my screen here, hold on one moment. Okay, we will get started. Is everybody? I just realized the flaw of doing this. Everybody's good. Hopefully everyone can see it. I'm going to jump out of it for 1 second to just check the chats to make sure none of you are saying you can't see it. Sorry about that. Wasn't good planning. Okay, so let me try this again. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. Okay, so we are talking about today how to use social media for your small business. And the first thing, it is kind of, I'm sure this is a silly question for all of us because we all know what social media is, but just a brief overview. Today I'm going to be talking about specifically social networks. So that is websites that enable communication and communities, and specifically, we're not talking about forums. We're just talking specifically about social networks. So the big ones being Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google Plus. If someone even uses Google Plus anymore, and I'm going to briefly mention Pinterest and Instagram as well. So basically, there are a bunch of questions any small business owner needs to answer when they are talking about whether or not to use social media. But before we get into that, I did want to talk about the nature of content on social media, because it is different than content on your website, right? You have content on your website. It is permanent as long as you pay your host, as long as you have your domain, your about page, your contact page. That stuff is going to be there as long as you're paying that bill. Your content on social media is permanent as well, but not in the same way, right? There's a really good chance, if you've been on Facebook like I have since it was founded, there's a really good chance that more than likely that Facebook has like my original post, whatever that was from 2004, somewhere. Now me finding it is another question. So it's not that the content isn't permanent. The problem is that it's really ephemeral or brief for your audience. So depending on how people interact with that content may be visible very briefly to other people on social media, or never visible, or visible for a very, very long time. And that's an important thing to remember, that the content on social media is visible in proportion to the way that it's interacted with. And so that if you are going to use social media for your business, you need to put content out that is going to be engaged with or interacted with. And if you don't do that, there's essentially no point in using social media for your business. Or not no point, but very little point, especially anything beyond, say, a Facebook business page, which I'm going to get into. Any kinds of actual posts of content, if your content is not going to be engaged with, why are you doing it? And that's a really important question that you need to ask when you're thinking about using social media for your business. And you need to ask it all the time, and you need to keep asking it. And you need to ask it when you're thinking about how to promote your business on social media, because if your content isn't ever engaged with, then essentially very few people will be aware that your business exists through social media. And that is, of course, the point. Someone has just joined us, I believe, so I'm going to jump out of the screen sharing for a moment, if I can, and just mute. Hi, Mary. I'm just going to mute you. Give me 1 second. And then, so if you have any questions, just go to the chat box. All right, so I'm going to go back to screen share. Sorry about this. Okay, share. So, all right. So the big question then is, should you use social media for your business. And the unfortunate answer is that this depends on what your business is and what your intentions are, and for social media and also for your business. And there is, I mean, it's less true now, but there was a tendency, or there was a trend a number of years ago where like everyone had to be on social media. Like there was this whole rush to like, why are you not on Facebook? Why is your business? Why are you not on Twitter? Why are you not on LinkedIn? You know, all this. People were always saying this, and no one was saying why you should even do that. It is possible to have a successful business without social media, obviously, because social media is not very old. It's only a decade and a bit old. It's really worth thinking, given the amount of time it takes to use social media appropriately. It's worth thinking about whether or not to use it, and if you're going to use it, to what extent. And why would you not want to use it? Well, say you get enough business through referrals. Say you get a ton of traffic to your website already. When I say referrals, I mean offline referrals, or you rely completely on advertising and you're okay with that. There's reasons. The other thing is that traffic on social media is not necessarily for sales. You know, it doesn't necessarily convert well. It can be the start of the conversion journey if you're trying to get people to trust your brand and have faith in your brand, and it's a good place to do that. But it isn't necessarily, depending on how you're interacting with people on social media, it isn't necessarily the place to actually sell something, right? Because as I'm sure you all feel this way too, when you use social media personally, you're not on Facebook or you're not on Twitter to buy something, right? I mean, that's not why you went on. And now it's becoming more and more acceptable to have ads, but it's worth seriously thinking about, when you are using social media to promote your company, thinking about why other people are there. And it's not because they're there to buy something, usually. And I can't stress that enough. If you just use social media specifically to be like, I have a deal on this, or come purchase this thing of mine, you know, it's not going to work, because that's not why most people are there. And so it is a matter of, you know, in addition, do you want to devote the time required and the resources required for branding purposes, as opposed to actually trying to just get a direct return on your investment and get sales? It's not just a question of that. It's also a question of, you know, are you going to use this in ways that are productive, that make you a good member of these communities, that like make you look like a good, you know, we've all seen the social media snafus over the years of a brand like tweeting the wrong thing and stuff like that. Basically, you know, that's not a great way of using it, obviously. And you want to be a good internet citizen when you use it, and you want to, you know, your brand wants to look, you want your brand to look good, because basically the whole point of this is more branding than it is direct sales. So that is the main question of the how, is you use it primarily for branding, but also the big question becomes, how much time do you devote to this? And that is a question that is different for every organization, every company, every person running a company. And it's all about, where do you put the value in the branding and the trust and the other kind of intangibles that you can get from social media presence, versus devoting similar amount of time to things you know are going to result in more direct revenue. And that is a big problem with using social media for businesses. It's often very hard to quantify the actual impact of it. So especially for people who own their own business and don't have any employees, a big question is, do I have the time to do this? And is it worth it? And I think that depends on the business. To just use a particular example, I know a few people who are life coaches. You know, they help people make big decisions in their lives, change careers and stuff like that. And for them, I think it makes a lot of sense to be on LinkedIn and Twitter, because they are their own brands. You know, their company names are their names, and it makes a lot of sense for them to spend time there and to engage with people because they are creating trust. But for other people, it may not make sense, as much sense for their businesses. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment and just ask if you have any questions. And if so, if you could just type them in the chat feature. No, are we all good? We're good? Okay. So let me share screens again. Sorry. Technical difficulties. All right. So we are going to talk about Facebook. We're going to talk about Google+. We're going to talk a little bit about Instagram and Pinterest. We're going to talk about LinkedIn. We're going to talk about Twitter. We are not going to talk about YouTube because I just wanted to address this briefly. A lot of people used to call YouTube social media. I don't think you can call it social media. It's a very, very different thing. Video content marketing is very much a thing. It works in some ways for lots of people. I have my own personal video content marketing success story involving millions of views and tens of thousands of subscribers, but I don't consider it social media. So we're not going to talk about that today. And then there's lots of other networks around the world. Some of them function very similar to Facebook, and some of them don't. I'm not going to talk about the foreign language networks, for example, but many of the principles apply for these as well. So first off, I just wanted to go over briefly the different types of engagement on social media, because there's a few, and it's important to know what they are and what they mean to your business, and whether or not they can be deemed valuable to your business. So as I said at the beginning, social media is all about engagement, right? The content, the only reason the content that you put out there on social media, with the very notable exception of a Facebook business page or whatever's in your profile, everything else is permanent in the sense that the company is going to have a record of it, but it's temporary in the sense that it's only going to stay up there as long as people engage with it. So there's different types of engagement. There's applause, there's amplification, there's discussion rather, and there's direct communication. So applause is a like on Facebook or on LinkedIn. It is a favorite or a heart symbol on Twitter. It's a +1 on Google+, if people still use Google+. It is the basic level of engagement. It is the bare minimum. And there was a time when Facebook ads first came out that everyone was really, really big into likes on Facebook, for example. And I can tell you that I was involved in a Facebook ads campaign, and that campaign generated 70,000 likes, which sounds wonderful. And they were essentially meaningless. Many of them were robots, and others were just people who had clicked on something once and had no intention of ever doing anything else with that post or that business page. And so likes are like if you get some likes, that's fine. And likes will keep the content in the feed longer. In the I realize I haven't really explained the technical aspect of how this works, but so what happens is when something is engaged with on social media, it stays in the feed of everyone who is involved somehow in that like longer. So say, for example, on Facebook, if I like something, not only is that going to be not only does that benefit, say I like a post from your business on you, not only does that mean that I've liked it and you have that like, but now there's a chance that people who are friends of mine who haven't already followed your business are going to see it too. It amplifies, it gets bigger. And so that part of it is great. The problem is that it's the most basic type of engagement, it's kind of meaningless. You know, if all you've done is liked something, it's not the kind of engagement you want when you're using social media to get attention. And it's now, that being said, the more you get of them, the more likely that you're going to get other types of engagement, and you're going to have that post stay in the feed. So you want likes, but you really want other types of engagement, but they're like a border. You know, you want applause, but it's sort of like a baseline. So then the second type is amplification, and that is better. That means that usually someone who shares or retweets, it's a share on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google Plus. It's a retweet on Twitter. Someone who shares is often someone who's also liked it, and even if they haven't, it's the same thing. But the other thing is that it's then in their feed as well, in a more dramatic way, in the sense that, like, if I like your post, you post something for your business, I'm following your Facebook page, you post it, I like it, that does indeed appear in some of my friends' feeds briefly. If I share it, that's my status update now, right? Like, so everybody who is friends with me or following me on the social network is now going to see your post because I shared it. So it's a much better piece of engagement, and it's something that you should concentrate, you know, when creating content for social media. The goal would be much more to have a share than a like. Shares are better. You always will get more applause than amplification. That's just the way it is. But you know, the goal would be to, like, if you're looking at two different things you've created and you want to go with you know, you want to go with what works, you're going to look for the thing that's going to get shared more than it is the one that gets liked more. So you need to respond to that. Likes you can't respond to, right? Like or favorites.
Mm-hmm.
If I like your Facebook post, for example, or I heart your tweet, or I +1 your Google Plus post, you don't really get very much information about me. However, if I share it, you can see, you know, like Facebook, for example, will show you the list of people who share it, and you can thank the person, or you can follow them and thank them. And if you follow them, you can reciprocate, right? Especially if they're say another business is not in competition but in the same neighborhood or something like that. If you start treating their content well, there's a good chance, even if they shared your content initially without any kind of intention of this happening, if you reciprocate with them, there's a really good chance that relationship will grow, and you can promote your content together. And you might even want to, like, send them a private message as well, and just, you know, depending on who it is, and say if it's a potential customer, you might want to send them a private message. So there's more information, and there's just general, you know, it's generally better in every way, shape, and form. Amplification is better than applause. So next up, we have discussion, which is when someone comments, or in the case of Twitter, replies. And this is in many ways the best type of engagement. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they shared it, which means that it's not necessarily going to get quite as wide reach, but it's going to stay up longer usually in the feeds that it is in. And the other thing is that if they comment and then you comment back, they will probably comment back. And one of the things that these algorithms take into account is the actual engagement of the actual users. So if they are like, I'm not suggesting you get into flame wars with people on social media, but for example, if someone asks a question about something you posted and you answer the question and they say thank you, and then you come back and you say you're welcome, this engagement is actually tracked, and it's going to promote the discussion in social media. It's going to rise up above content that's not having that engagement. And that is great. That's what you want. That's why you're there. And it also gives you a chance to show off how you are as a member of social media. So you can be very helpful when people comment, and that can everybody's seen these viral Facebook posts too. I think of the owner business owners who make big statements. Like there was that a few years ago. There was that business that wouldn't apologize for being open on Thanksgiving and got all this, or being closed on Thanksgiving rather, and got all this attention. Like there's opportunity for that. Now, what the right way of doing that is another question. But once again, it gives you a chance to know who's actually interacting with your content. And when you see that, you can then engage with them in other ways, such as through direct communication and following them and liking their stuff. And especially if they're another related business or they're a influencer, then that's something that, you especially if they're an influencer, you want to work on that relationship. Finally, we have direct communication, which is, the sending of an actual private message. And that is powerful because obviously you can tell people about your business in ways that you don't have to worry as much about your public persona. You could offer people deals, for example, say it's specifically for you. If you were trying to close, you could actually sort of try to close sales in that way, in which it doesn't make any sense in other parts of social media. And that it is personalized. I would say that you can get a little carried away. I don't know about you, but when I follow people on Twitter, a lot of people send me a form private message now, and it's not appealing at all. Like when I get that form message, I'm not interested in that at all. So I think be careful with it, but it is a good thing to do if you think there's a possibility of some kind of relationship there that's valuable, either if it's a customer or whether it's business to business. I should also say is that you really want to check your private messages if you have social media, because people will send private messages, and if your notifications are off, you're not going to know about them, and they're going to come away with a bad impression of your business, right? If they send a message to you, just like an email, if you have social media and someone's sending private messages to your social media inbox and you're not responding, they're going to get annoyed. So don't turn off your notifications, or if you are going to turn off your notifications, log in periodically if you have social media. I am just going to stop sharing briefly so I can ask if anybody has questions. Why is this not? There we go. Does anyone have questions at the moment? Oh, yes. So Will's also mentioning that there is click-throughs as well. But that is the goal of what you're posting, of course. If you can actually get people to go to your site, actual traffic to your site is what you're looking for. So when people do that, they go from being a person on social media, or it sort of switches from being like traffic on social media to actual traffic to your website. And obviously, it's not necessarily obvious, so I shouldn't say obviously, but like one of the main reasons you're on social media is to get more traffic to your website. And so if you do post content on social media, you need to make sure there's that link there and it looks nice. But it's important to know that click-throughs are not super high. There's a very classic cliche, particularly on Facebook, of people who like things without clicking on them, right? Like we've all seen it when we're on Facebook, and people will comment on a post with the headline. They'll get mad about a headline, and it's very clear they haven't even opened the article, right? So you have to assume, and I have seen plenty of data to back this up. You have to assume that a lot of the engagement that's happening on social media, including likes or applauses, amplifications, and and discussion does not actually translate to a lot of traffic to your website unless there's something really appealing about that content you created. Is that goodwill? Are you happy with that? I'm going to assume that since I don't see you typing anything else. Also, before I get back to the presentation, I reminded myself that I also wanted to mention something that I forgot earlier, which is that I wanted to briefly mention influencers. Influencer marketing has become very trendy in the last couple of years, and I feel like I need to mention it. Influencers are people who are paid or otherwise compensated to promote various brands because of their gigantic social media following. So we all, I'm sorry to bring them up, but the Kardashians would be a very good example of this. They do that. There's lots of other people. A lot of people on YouTube do it too. There is value in that in some cases if you can find it. If you can get someone with a much bigger following you to promote your content or promote your business in some way, that is fantastic. The problem with that is that there is a bubble. Let's put it this way. And in that bubble, there are a lot of people out there who fancy themselves influencers, and they see other influencers getting rich, and they think they should be rich too. So you should always, if you are approaching an influencer, if you say I had the possibility of having someone in the digital marketing SEO world share something I wrote, a post I wrote, or I'm working on an online manual to marketing your small business online. Say once I'm finished it, say I had the opportunity that someone could share it for me. Now, instead of actually just sharing it, this guy who has like tons and tons of Twitter followers and a huge Facebook presence, he wants something for it. I need to know what that is ahead of time, because there are, if you Google influencer marketing, you will hear about some absurd sums of money and other things that are being traded for not a lot of attention. People with relatively small followings asking for hundreds of dollars for very little effort, and so just be careful. It's all, I just bring it up to say, when it comes to influencer marketing, which this isn't really about, but I should just mention it, it's something to really be careful, because at least in the moment we're in a bubble, and there's some people who think that they are owed a lot of money for the fact that they have managed to get like 1 million Twitter followers or whatever it is. All right, back to the presentation. Let me just share my screen again. Sure. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. All right. Okay, so Facebook. The big question for Facebook is, do you have a Facebook profile or you have a Facebook business account? They are different. Facebook business accounts are very limited in what they can do. I cannot, when I'm managing a Facebook business page, I cannot go out and make a whole bunch of new friends. I'm prohibited from doing that. I can, with a profile, as we've all experienced, when you go on Facebook and Facebook wants you to befriend a whole bunch of people you don't even know. And sometimes, I remember back when everyone first got on, I ran out of 1,000 friends. You can't do that with a Facebook business account. So the question you need to ask yourself is, do I use Facebook personally as well? If you do use it personally, in addition to your business, you should have a Facebook business account and a Facebook profile. And a friend of mine from university was supposed to join us today, and I was going to use him as an example. He has not shown up. I'm going to use him as an example anyway, to punish him for not showing up. He and I, like I said, went to university together, and we have been friends on Facebook since Facebook existed. If I suddenly only ever was sharing things, or primarily sharing things related to my business, that would get really annoying for him, and he might unfollow me. He might even unfriend me. And the same thing is true for anybody who uses their profile for their own business, if they have been using Facebook socially in the past. So use Facebook socially, not for your business. Don't combine the two, because your friends and family will get very mad, or at least annoyed, and they won't tell you necessarily that they're annoyed with you. So let's assume that we're all going to have a Facebook business account. The one thing in all of this, at the beginning I said maybe you don't need social media. The one thing I would say everybody needs, every business needs rather, is a Facebook business page. And that is because it is a permanent place online. Unlike all the other content on social media, except for profiles, it is essentially a profile. It's an expanded profile. It is permanent, and you can customize it, and it's there. And tons of people, there are millions and millions of Facebook users, some of whom may be searching for you on Facebook rather than, or something similar to you on Facebook rather than, using Google or using YouTube. So if you just want to do the bare minimum for social media, you have a Facebook business page. And this brings me to a question. Does anyone here not have a Google business page? Just going to check the chats. Okay, I assume that means all of you do. Good. This is not the topic of this particular presentation. However, I can't stress enough that especially in this day and age, with Google getting more and more, Google search results getting more and more customized and more focused on Google rather than on your site, you need a Google business page. But that is another story. So Facebook, you can promote things with your business either organically or with ads. People can like them, they can share them, they can comment on them, they can review your business, which is another virtue of having a business page. Having a ton of positive Facebook reviews is a good thing. You can put that on your website. There are advantages that, in addition to just having a presence on Facebook from this. The way your ability to, promote your business is somewhat restrained, and it is basically contingent on you having followers, people who've liked your business or followed your business, and you kind of have to hope that people will engage with your stuff. They will share it, they will comment, and so there's a lot of time that needs to be invested on figuring, first of all, on getting people to like, either spend the money on the ads to get people to like your business, which I wouldn't encourage, or get people to like it by constantly putting content up there, and then trying to find the right content that's going to be engaged with, whether it's through shares or comments or even clicks. And then it takes a while, basically, before you will get much results of anything, unless you have you're serving a real niche market, or you're focusing really locally. That's another advantage. And it can seem from a very early point that it may not feel worthwhile, and that's a question that constantly has to be asked. I would say that, for me personally, I think the reviews are often a real bonus from it. If you can get your clients to leave reviews on the internet, which is a very important thing, Facebook is a great and easy way to do it. But in terms of like actually driving traffic, a lot of this has to do with, like I said, putting in a lot of time for what feels like no or little, return on investment, and luck. Unfortunately, most of the viral successes we've heard about through social media come down to, especially with Facebook sharing, come down to luck, unfortunately, which is not very reassuring. So in many cases, you may just want to have a Facebook business page and kind of just, not think too much about spending a lot of time sharing content to Facebook. I mean, unless it's part of your regular procedure, right? If you have a blog, say, or you're adding new stuff to your site, you should put it up on your social media, if you have social media, just as a matter of course, and put it up periodically, maybe. maybe find a time every 3 months or something, or something like that to update the stuff. But it will require, if you're really determined to grow your business through Facebook, it's going to require a lot of time and a lot of interaction with the few people who are interacting with your content initially until that gets bigger. And it can seem very daunting. And if you own your own business and you don't have any employees and your time is better spent doing something else that's actually resulting in money, you should be doing that instead, I think. So LinkedIn, I'm going to talk about a little briefly. I think there are basically two main uses for businesses for LinkedIn, and that is business to business. If you provide a service to other businesses, you absolutely should be on LinkedIn. And if you are hiring, you should be on LinkedIn. You can have a business page on LinkedIn as well. But if you are not providing business to business services and you are not looking to use LinkedIn for hiring, the amount of time you spend on LinkedIn should not be high, because as much as everyone should be on LinkedIn, in terms of networking, especially if you're, say, you want to meet other people in your industry, for example, that's a good use of it. But in terms of like actually trying to expand your brand, people are not on LinkedIn. Again, just like they're not on Facebook and not on Twitter to buy stuff. And unless there is an actual networking component to what you're doing on LinkedIn, it's probably not the greatest place to be promoting your business. Again, unless you are actually providing business to business services like Will and myself. And then in that case, it makes sense for us to be on LinkedIn actively. I mean, because, there are people who are like, some people found this through LinkedIn. So, but I would say in terms of people who are direct to the consumer businesses, it doesn't make a lot of sense to use it a lot. Have your business page, have your profile, be discoverable, but it's not like just like the other social networks. It went through a trend where everyone was like, "Oh, you have to be on LinkedIn. Oh, you have to be on LinkedIn," and it kind of got overblown. And I certainly don't hear too many stories of people making, having like, say, a viral LinkedIn post that like increases a lot of traffic to their website, for example. So up next we have Twitter, and Twitter is a toughie in many ways. Twitter is extremely useful for a couple of things. It is also extraordinarily time consuming. Because of its nature. It's even more, with your ability to, first of all, with the short, I know they've doubled the length of the posts, but with the short posts and also the ability to sort of get sucked into like battles and wars, for lack of a better word, on Twitter, which are not necessarily conducive to your branding. It can be very, very useful in certain circumstances. It is also a huge time suck, and it is the biggest people with the biggest Twitter accounts with tons of followers have so many more followers than the rest of us that it doesn't even, like, when you post something, you're posting in the tiniest drop of a bucket. So what I would say is, if you need to provide follow-up customer service for whatever you do, it's useful. It's useful because, just like someone calling you on the phone, it's a way, provided you or someone on your staff, if you have employees, is available on Twitter, you can have a customer service Twitter account. And I don't know about you, but I've totally used Twitter customer service for a number of businesses, in preference to calling a phone number and being on hold. So if you're using it for that, it is extremely valuable. I mean, like, I don't know that there's a better, the only other thing I can think of that might be better than that would be having a text message service for support. Like, it really is, provided it's staffed, it's a great thing to have if you need to provide that kind of customer service. If you don't need to provide that kind of customer service, it kind of begs the question, why use it? The other reason you might really want to use Twitter is if you, and this applies to Facebook as well, is if your business travels in any way. And the best example that I've ever heard of is food trucks. Food trucks need to tell people where they are. Twitter and Facebook, to a lesser extent, are a great way of informing fans of the food truck of where they are next. And especially if you're in a business that's moving, like a food truck that's moving around within a given day, and it's going to be one place in the morning, one place in the afternoon. It's good. It's better than a website. But again, if your business is permanent in the same place, why should you use it? And I don't necessarily have a good answer beyond what I suggested earlier, was if you are your own brand and you're either the name of the company or you're the face of the company, then being on Twitter, having a presence on Twitter can help build trust. It can, lend your brand a sense of authenticity because people see what they think is the real person. It's, if you are a company and you are not your own brand, you can use it much like you would use Facebook, but there is limited potential, just like there is with Facebook, in terms of getting people to engage with and beyond engage as well, in terms of actually turning them into clients. And so it's worth thinking about when you think about how much time to spend with Twitter. The thing is, even more so than Facebook, the more time you're on Twitter, the more likely something will pay dividends, right? If you're on Twitter all the time and you're constantly engaging with other people, you're going to get more followers, and and people are eventually going to start hearting and retweeting and that kind of thing. But to get to that point, it takes so much time. I just tell you a personal story. I know we're at 9, so I'm going to try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. It's a brief personal story. I have discovered in my own life, I don't use Twitter much personally, but if I just constantly follow the people who follow me, I get more followers. Now, not exponentially. It's very slow. I get a few new followers a week, but I follow all of them, and then I get a few more new followers all week, and I've doubled, or 1.5 times, something like that. My Twitter followers, putting in the bare minimum effort to my own personal Twitter account. When I see the bare minimum, I don't log in once a day necessarily, and I don't put up much. So that does show you there's potential for growth if you're willing to spend the time. But then the question is, you have to ask, are people clicking through when you do share stuff related to your business? Are they going to your site? You have to look at your analytics. And you also have to ask yourself, is the amount of time being invested in Twitter or Facebook, is it worth the exposure for my brand? Is it worth the trickle of traffic I'm getting to my website? It's an important question. Lastly, before we move on to the next one, Twitter has been indexed by Google for the last year and a half, something like that, and Facebook is not. LinkedIn is not. So that's a plus. Anything you do on Twitter will be indexed, and that means that it is findable through the search engine. And so that is something you should consider if you're thinking about Twitter versus Facebook. That would be something in Twitter's favor. All right, very briefly, Instagram and Pinterest, I've lumped them together because they are both primarily visual social networks, though you can obviously take a picture of text or put text in a picture. I would say that there is no point in using Instagram or Pinterest unless you are in a visual business. If you make dresses, if you are in restaurants, if you make anything that you can take a nice picture of, it makes sense, especially if you have a storefront and that kind of thing, it makes sense to use these. If you are not providing that kind of service, it's really hard to see why you should use these. I will say that Pinterest, it's easier to find communities on Pinterest than it often is on other social networks, specifically target communities. But if you can't make your business look good visually, then you shouldn't be bothering, in my opinion. And I think it's a real challenge. I think there's a tendency for everyone to want to be on all the social networks in order to promote their business. Like, I know businesses who are on Pinterest or Instagram who have no business being there and have forgotten about their accounts, basically because they tried and then nothing happened, because they're sharing, stuff that makes no sense and doesn't appeal to the aesthetic of either of the social networks. So it's not a priority, I guess, unless you have a visual business, and then it should be a priority. Like if you have a nice cake you want to share because you're a bakery, it makes perfect sense for a bakery to be on both of these sites, right? All right. Lastly, people still use Google Plus. They do. Depending on whose stats you trust, some people claim Google Plus has more users than Facebook. I think that's laughable, but I've heard that. Much of what I said for Facebook applies to Google Plus. The difference being that Google Plus is indexed by Google, obviously, and that all of this is findable through Google search, which is a positive. The other thing I will say about Google Plus that is different than Facebook is that there are some really, really actively engaged people on Google Plus. And sometimes if you can get the right fans on Google Plus, they will really promote you in ways that people on Facebook just won't, because people do seem to be, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing because I didn't mute it. Sorry about that. Anyway, what was I saying? I was saying that there are some really active and engaged communities on Google Plus, and if you can interact with them and get them to promote you, it could work out very well. The problem is a lot of those communities are very insular, and they are often, like, one of the things for me personally, if I go on Google Plus and promote digital marketing stuff, it might be shared by a lot of other people in the digital marketing space, but they are not going to see, they're not going to share it in front of other people who might be my clients. What they're going to do is they're going to share it to each other, and it becomes, there's a famous meme about Google Plus. It's called Meanwhile on Google Plus, and it's a hot tub crammed full of men. And while it may seem a little crude, it's kind of true. There are a lot of people on Google Plus who are essentially there just re-promoting everybody, all their friends' content, in my experience. And that can be, it might feel like you're getting a lot of attention, but that attention is from people who could never actually ever possibly be clients because they're possibly competitors. So that's my experience with Google Plus anyway. I don't love it. But that's not to say you shouldn't give it a try. And if it's working for you, you should use it. The other thing it's important to mention is Google Plus may be slowly dying. And Facebook is transferring some of its Facebook. I think I said Facebook. Google Plus is transferring some of its features to Google Business Pages. For example, you can now create posts with Google Business Pages for the last maybe 6 months or a year. And your ability to do that, I mean, I don't know that those posts work very well. I've tried them myself, and there's not a lot of engagement. But it suggests that you are going to get more and more of the Google Plus features in Google Business Pages, and maybe in 5 years or even less, Google Plus maybe not even, it just may be subsumed by other Google products. So I would say that unless you have successful experience with Google Plus, or a community you're trying to reach, that it's probably not worth your time, because it might not even be in existence in a few years. I mean, I don't know, but this is a definite thing to think about. So that is it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If I can just do that. Yeah. And okay. Will has a question that is Google Plus is more techie and nerdy, and that is absolutely true. So if you are in a tech space, Google Plus might be more of a good place for you. Like I said, though, my experience is that a lot of the people are all like your friendly competition, resharing your stuff rather than people who would actually be interested in it for real. Does anyone else have any questions they want to type in, or should I? I can unmute you and you can ask questions if you prefer. Why don't I do that? Does anyone have any questions?
No questions. It's really good content, especially about the Facebook business page, which I do not have.
No, yes?
Yes.
All right. So, well, in that case, thank you very much.
Okay.
And thank you for participating. I have some resources that I'm going to provide. I'll send them by email. And yeah, and we can just, if you have any questions, then you can just follow up too. And sorry for running a little late. We got started a little late, so hopefully that's okay with everybody. And
yep. Thank you.
Thanks again for participating.
Okay. Good night.
All right. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Just gone. All right. Right. As for the Instagram, I am not the person to hold a detailed thing on Instagram. I don't have a smartphone, so I shouldn't be the person to help you with Instagram. But there's definitely people out there who could, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. Good night. It was good. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you so much. It was really good.
But I saw you. When you were a kid, you used to walk around naked, and now you're a kid and you still walk around naked. Go get a napkin and wipe it.